What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Hi everyone, Tillian here, and we were over at twitch.tv/TillianPlay last night for the 2.2 launch. Seed was released, new story content, should be a hype moment, and with any new character release specifically, Prydwen's usually going to add that character to their tier list as well as do a change log, which I usually like to do a live reaction to. But last night I had such a visceral reaction. It was basically an incoherent mess, and I had to re-record it offline to talk about it because I think it's actually kind of an important topic in a way. I know a lot of people will just say tier list or tier list and they're not worth their time, but a lot of people, specifically more casual users, will use them as the gospel truth to help them make really good polling decisions. And I think this is where we warned some of the consequences of combining specifically the stunner and support category, and it came to fruition, specifically kind of what I thought would happen. So without further ado, let's just dive into it. I've already seen it, so it won't be a live reaction, but if you look here, we're specifically just going to focus on tier 2 and above. Number one, I want to give them their flowers, right? So I believe that Seed being in tier 1 is a good choice. Way too often in other games, you will see a unit that has a obvious pairing, what I like to call a peanut butter and jelly scenario, that is obviously going to elevate that character into a tier above probably where it deserves to be at the time of release. Seed is a tier 1 unit at release with the watch list tag, which I think is a smart move. It makes a ton of sense. And I want to give them their flowers in that case because I think that's correct. If you were to pull Seed today, there is questions of her validity, the meta of her team format, etc., etc. Great positioning. She could easily be elevated in a tier 0.5 with another unit just based on how her kit works. I agree with this decision wholeheartedly, but it's where we start to move over to the right that I believe we start to see some decisions that just, I don't think they make a lot of sense. Bernice drops down in the tier 1, and I think just on a if you just look at this from a surface level, it may make sense, but if you dive deeper into it, I don't believe it's realistically the right decision. So Bernice, if you look at her as a meta-defining character, specifically in comparisons to other anomaly secondary DPSs like Yanagi and Vivian. Vivian's obviously the GOAT, the standard, the tier 0. Bernice does seem to fall behind, specifically against Yanagi, and even more so now. But you have to realize that the environment of the meta shill is forcing that gap to appear even wider than it may seem to be. To showcase this, we're currently in a very much electric defined meta. We're seeing that in Shield defense. We're seeing that in Deadly Assault. We've seen it in Deadly Assault and Shield defense, not only for this patch, but a couple patches previously. We're seeing a lot of shills specifically in electric defining meta, which is going to give Yanagi a big advantage over Bernice. I'm not here to say that Yanagi is worse than Bernice or even equal to. In fact, I think that Yanagi is more flexible, a stronger unit in general. I don't think the gap in the secondary DPS is as far as dropping her down a whole tier. Now, you can argue with that. I think that's debatable, but I think if you look at them in a vacuum, they do the same thing similarly and achieve similar goals. And I think that it's just, I think we're hyper focusing on the now, and I think we're going to end up getting back into a fire defining meta, and she's just going to go back up. And at that point, you're sliding up and down based upon the context of the environment. And I don't think that's what tier list should do. Tier list should be more about a stable environment for good decision making that's based on the character's worth, not what the current shill of the environment is. But I'm not going to die on that hill. That's not where I get frustrated. Where I get frustrated is obviously the new support tier, where they've removed stunners and put them into a single category with supports. The top stays the same. We have Lighter, Astra, and Yuzuha, all phenomenal characters. Specifically, Yuzuha and Astra are absolutely fantastic characters. Lighter in the teams that he supports is absolutely fantastic. We go down one more tier in the tier 5. We have, this is where Nicole is really the shining character in our tier 0.5. She's the only one in this category that effectively stands on her own. And what I mean by that is if you look to the left and the right of her, Jifufu is here because of her pairing strictly with Yuxuan. If Yuxuan doesn't exist and Jifufu was released on her own as a character, there is no way she's tier 0.5. She's just not as strong of a character. She doesn't support any other thing in the game to a degree that allows her to be in this tier 5 category, specifically with the examples that they are setting below it. Secondly, Sukaku would be nowhere near tier 0.5 if it wasn't for the fact that she supports specifically mono ice. And this is where we start getting into problems. At what point are we just going to allow Jifufu and Sukaku to gain relevance purely because of a DPS standard, and we're ignoring everything else around it? And I'll get to why that's really, really important when we move down to tier 1. So Lycon moves down into tier 1 purely because Yuzaha is easier to use in the mono ice team. I'm perfectly understanding of that. I get it. However, nothing changed. If you didn't want to pull Yuzaha because you knew how to do mono ice, your damage output is effectively unchanged. So in what world what world can we justify that because another unit does the same thing relatively easier, that the other unit goes down in value, despite the fact the result is the same? It doesn't make any sense. We also see Trigger moves down to the tier 1. Trigger is going to be the one that you probably saw the most hubbub about. I cannot understand in what universe they specifically think Trigger is a tier 1 support or stunner. If you've looked into this game in any way, shape, or form, you understand because of not only Trigger's utility, her off-field capabilities, and her also function and how variable she works, she is almost the de facto second choice for every team that requires a stunner or would like to use a stunner. And as we've seen from other Eastern players and the Eastern market that plays ZZZ, Trigger does fantastic as the de facto anomaly stun agent. There was clears with Alice that were absolutely fantastic, and it's a pairing that nobody here is talking about. You can't make sense of these things where they're looking for specifically niche things like mono ice, which most of the community knows about but isn't playing, when you're not going to talk about Quinky and like her ability to be a second stunner on a Yuxuan team. Why are we looking at specific niche teams, but we're not looking at other niche teams when their relevance is just the same? And then we're not looking at what Trigger's variables are outside of just the Sambi team. Trigger is effectively being punished purely because in her best team, she's performing with Ambi and Ambi's underperforming. It doesn't make any sense. And this is what we try to warn you about when you combined the support and the stunner field, because they actively do different things. If you bring them into a single sphere, you focus on specifically what Trigger can do as a support and not her variables outside of that key cog in the wheel of a team. There's a reason why she works outside of a stun capacity and why she's so good on every team. There is a reason why she works so well with Alice in anomaly teams and no other stunner can pull off the same clears. And we're still just hyper focusing specifically on the things that don't matter and just saying, oh, well, Sambi's bad. Trigger is best in slot with Sambi. Trigger's bad. And it's just not the case. Lucy drops into tier 1.5. Nothing about Lucy changed. Literally nothing changed from Lucy previously to now, outside of the fact that her use case is probably lesser purely because of our tier 0 supports. By having both an Astra and a Yuzaha on your team, you don't need a Lucy as much because you have more options, right? A Pan for Rupture specifically, an Astra and a Yuzaha gives you more a bit of flexibility with your team compositions, which doesn't require you to need maybe Lucy as much. but nothing about Lucy changed. She's still a great support. She still does exactly what she did yesterday, but we're dropping her down into tier 1.5. Why? Explain to me why Lucy is in the same tier as Rina at this point in time, outside of the fact that maybe their use cases are both less because more people have more invested accounts. You can't, like, there is no way you can justify that Lucy and Rina are in the same, especially no weapons, right? For Rina, we're not looking at her mindscapes. You can't justify it. It's not equal. Pulchra and Trigger don't deserve to be in the same sentence. They're not as easy to play. They have massive requirements with an M6 that makes her useless outside of it. And I get it, they use M6 as their staple for their 4 stars, but they're not the same. They don't have the team flexibilities. They don't have the use cases in Anomaly. It just it's not equal. And to say that it is false. If I was to look you in the eye and a brand new player or maybe a player that doesn't understand the meta nearly as much and say, Trigger has more value than Pulchra, and they're saying, well, they're on the same tier on Prydwen, how am I supposed to help them make good decisions with their account when you are giving them awful decisions? There's no nuance to discuss this. I can't think about why. I said this is what would happen. I mentioned it when it came out, that when you combine the support and the stun tiers, you would lose the ability to look at them objectively and understand what each one is giving you individually. And what you've done is you've now comprised them into one category of support, and you only look at it from a support perspective. You lose all of the nuance of what makes ZZZ's team synergies and gameplay different and exciting. I don't know where to, I don't know what to do with this. This is by far the worst tier list that I have seen in my time of playing HSR, Wuthering Waves, and ZZZ. It is atrociously bad. And it showcases to me, whoever is in charge of doing this list doesn't play the game outside of a casual perspective. And I mean an insanely casual perspective. Because every single major CC that was talking about ZZZ, specifically when Alice came out, was talking about how Trigger worked with her. But we don't hear it, we don't see it, and the only thing we got was that much dialogue. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's terrible. Listen, guys, that's all I'm gonna do today. I'm getting fired up again just talking about it. I'm gonna have to edit this a little bit just to make it usable again. But Prydwen, you gotta do better. That changelog, atrocious. Be more transparent. Let people know why. Because I'm sitting here looking at it. Oh, my 4-star Pulchra is as good as my Trigger. Nah, bro. No. That's gonna do it for me, guys. It's a short one. It's a quick one. I'm getting heated already, but that's it. Tillian out.